As we count down the days to Las Vegas, I'm connecting with speakers, sponsors, and industry experts to get a pulse on what we can expect to see at Enterprise Connect 2026.
Thank you, Justin. My name is Amitha Pulijala. I'm the CPO of Cyara.
Amitha, it is great to get some time with you ahead of Enterprise Connect, where we will both be on site. What I would love to do is have a conversation that explores a couple of things. First is there's a lot that is on people's minds as they get ready for an event like this. So let's dig into maybe some of the trends and topics that you're thinking about right now. But then I'd also like to help people prepare to make the most of this experience. It's time out of office, it's time away from your team or home. So we want to make sure that Enterprise Connect is incredibly valuable for everyone who's there. Here's where I want to get started. A lot of businesses that we're talking to, they're looking to deploy Agentic AI across a number of their customer interactions. As a product leader, what's your perspective on where you see these deployments most often fail once they get past the pilot stage?
Very good question. And I would say over the last few months, I've talked to a lot of customers, and from the product perspective, I would say four things, right? One, a lot of customers are looking to scale intelligence with Agentic AI, but not reliability. So pilot, as you know, always work in very controlled conditions. And however, in production, when your agents operate across thousands of real conversations, integrations, edge cases, and you have all these carriers in the picture as well, and policies, when you have all this without continuous validation and monitoring, even small failures anywhere in this ecosystem compound very quickly. And that is where the customer trust goes down very fast. So I would say really look at it from the whole ecosystem perspective and not just the component perspective. That's number one. Number two, especially with AI agents, even with component testing, they don't test the behavior, they just test the components. I've seen many teams validate individual prompts, models, or APIs, but not end-to-end agent behavior. And this is across multi-turn conversations. Typically, agentic systems make decisions very, very dynamically, as we know. And if you're not testing how those decisions play out across different turns, across different journeys, you are just flying blind. And this is where I see most of the teams in POC, they have good defined conditions, but when they scale and they get into this whole non-deterministic space, they see that their pilots have failed, right? And number three, I would say is, and this is again would improve over time, but this is the whole operational ownership and maturity model. When you are doing a pilot, again, your scope is well defined, who is running the pilot is well defined, and your scenarios are well defined, right? But when you put it in the production scenario, clear understanding of where failure has happened across the whole integrations and ecosystem, as I was mentioning before, where that failure has happened and how to fix it is always something that people struggle with. And once pilots end, it's very unclear who owns it. Is it IT? Is it the whole CX definition? Is it my model or the vendor of the model? So AI spans all of them, right? So there needs to be a clear understanding of accountability and clear guardrails. And without that, I think having a successful production deployment is definitely a question mark, right? And last but most important, I would say, is the whole trust mechanism, right? Most people don't think about trust during pilots. As I was saying, they optimize more on intelligence, but when they add governance, auditability, and compliance after the agents are live, it's too late.
Amitha, I have seen across all four of those the same thing play out. I want to come back to the trust conversation in a minute, but two things I maybe want to reinforce. The first is this move from pilot to production. And what I think is important for organizations to think about is how do we thoughtfully open the aperture more and more and more, rather than just go from, hey, here was the test environment and now it's live and everything goes out of control. There are ways to be really, really smart about introducing it into live environments. And then to your point about feedback, making sure that we're able to understand where is it pressure testing the system, where are there points of failure, and how do we be incredible agile and iterative, which I think for a lot of leaders, that's an uncomfortable muscle to build, of having to make a lot of change, to make sure that this is successful. And the other thing I'm going to be really interested to listen for Enterprise Connect this year is the piece around ownership and accountability. Even if I look at last year's Enterprise Connect, one of my panels, I brought up a story of an executive who said this was creating an all-out turf war in their enterprise around responsibility in making sure that it's deployed effectively, that people are being held accountable for the right things. And those are decisions that need to be made before we start trying to design and deploy these technologies to make sure that we're doing it right and that we can, again, there's going to be shifting tide, if you will, in what this looks like for our business. So having the right group to connect and collaborate on these projects is so important.
Absolutely.
I want to go back to that trust word. If you think about making disruptive technologies safe to scale, what do you think organizations should put in place to make sure that any AI-driven customer interactions do stay trustworthy, that they are compliant, and that they're ultimately effective as they try to scale them across their various channels?
A very good question, Justin. And I've seen a lot of our customers, and I've been having a lot of conversations with our customers over last couple of months. And what I see is most enterprises, right, they optimize for automation, but they don't optimize for customer trust. And trust and compliance should be, as I said, built from day one and not retrofitted after incidents. It's too late by then, right? So I would say from the organization's perspective, one is the whole end-to-end journey validation, right, is very important. Your end users don't really experience your intents or models, right? They experience the conversations. And enterprises should definitely test and monitor full journeys and not very isolated components. And the second one is, and this is also very common that I've seen, is with agents and agentic AI. Now they get into this objective-based testing. And usually when you start testing these objectives, when the objective is met, you say, hey, your test is successful or your journey is successful. But you really have to figure out how the agent has responded, whether it has responded appropriately, whether it has responded correctly, whether it has actually resolved the issue to an extent where you can close the issue. I think these are those subtle things, right? This is not just binary, whether you're yes or no or 0 or 1, right? Basically, you are actually monitoring for the behavior and the way the issue was resolved. And something that you brought up as well, consistency across channels. And I would also add a little bit of additional angle to it, right? It's consistency across channels for sure, because most of the conversations also go multi-channel, like from voice to chat to messaging and so on. So you should see the same behavior across the channels. But at the same time, I would also say that not just in terms of channels, but consistency, around the type of models that you have as well. And I'll explain this a little bit more. So most of the customers that we talk to, they have operated in the IVR model, right? Where it was very rule-based. You ask a question, the IVR is trained to give a specific answer and so on. And now what they're trying to do is they're trying to change a part of that IVR with maybe like an agentic or LLM bot, right? And when they are trying to fit the LLM bot in one of their journeys, right, you still need to test overall. So how do you test these hybrid journeys for the customer, right? Maybe one part of that hybrid journey is more deterministic, the other part is not deterministic. So overall, how do you assess the experience of the customer? So that's a very hard problem to solve as well. And that's essentially where we are moving as Cyara as well. And finally, I think to your question on scaling safely, I would say fast detection is very important, and also correction of that failure, that feedback loop, right? So that once you fail, you detect, you correct it, and come back.
It's such a good reminder, and trust, whether it's customer trust, employee trust, is so fragile, and once broken, it is difficult to restore. So your points around making sure that we have contextual understanding, not just about one thing, but the effects up and downstream of that working or not, is so important. You talked about the time to understanding and our ability to surface and address and affect change on wherever there are challenges quickly is so important. And the other thing I want people to sit with in an uncomfortable way is what's causing so many of our experiences today to fall short are all of these unintentional blind spots where these types of friction or frustration or failure points occur. And it is so important for us, if we want to get it right, to have visibility in a meaningful way. So really, really appreciate the things that you called out. And of course, the work that your team is doing to enable organizations to have the right tool set to do that well. On that point, things I want to maybe talk about Cyara specifically for a moment is, as people are making their plans for the conference, there's obviously a lot competing for their attention, whether it's sessions, but it's also solutions on the expo floor. Can you just maybe take a minute for people who aren't familiar with Cyara and what you do, maybe share why they might want to stop by and learn a bit about your team? What is it that you help organizations do maybe better than anybody else from your point of view?
Absolutely, I would be glad to. Cyara is a CX assurance platform, and we have been helping our customers with CX assurance for past 10 years, making sure our customers avoid bad CX calls. So we have solutions around CX test case generation, functional testing, regression testing, end to end, and in terms of monitoring and performance testing as well. And very particularly, what we are looking into the future is how to scale agentic AI in customer experience with confidence, right? By making it testable, measurable, and governable in production. And that is essentially what we are bringing to Enterprise Connect this year. And I would say very specifically 3 important things for people coming to Enterprise Connect and want to learn more about Cyara, right? So one of the things that we very uniquely help the CX leaders understand and solve is how to test what AI does and not just what AI says, right? So we bring this objective-based, persona-driven testing that validates outcomes across the multi-turn journeys so that the teams can measure whether the agent has behaved correctly for, let's say, angry customer versus a happy customer, and not just whether the agent has a script that it has executed or not, right? This is essentially making sure your agent is meeting the customers where they are. Right? So that's number 1. Number 2 is also making sure the leaders have that confidence, right? Because we all know that a lot of this, agentic AI or LLM based bots are non-deterministic. But how do you get the confidence, right? So this is where we help our leaders, not by just saying that the tests have passed or failed, but get reasoned results and confidence scoring, why the agent has succeeded or fell short, right? Where it missed clarifying questions and what changed across runs. So these are very important to understand when you are testing your behavior of an agent. And this is what we do very effectively. And also, as I said, one of the most important things for leaders to pay attention to is how to operationalize AI trust across real enterprise risks. Right? So we help teams continuously validate the trust layer with very practical and automatable checks. So we have fact checking where we can check against the customer's source of truth, and we have misuse testing to see how easily an agent can be coerced into unsafe behavior, and we have seen that happen a lot of times in public forums as well, where public bots have said something that they were not supposed to. And also compliance testing, right? Mapped to regions and regulations, whether it's privacy, security, or regulatory, HIPAA compliance, PCI, or EU AI Act. So how do you make sure you're compliant with those different regulations and at scale? Right? With no human QA can cover that manually, but all these regulations are multiple hundreds of pages. So how do you make sure you actually are doing compliance tests of your agent or your bot against these privacy acts and security and regulatory acts? So we help our customers there. So essentially, going back to your first question, right? We help our customers move from AI pilots that really demo well to systems that they can actually operate with continuous validation, trust, and monitoring across the channels at scale.
And so many leaders are thinking about that right now. They're wanting to, or they're currently deploying these types of technologies into their environment. And to borrow and reinforce 2 words that you used, They want the confidence that the tool is going to work in the way that they designed it to work. It's going to give the information when, where, and how they need it to. And then they need the assurance that it's going to meet the regulatory or security compliance standards that they need to have in place to do this well. So if that is something that you're watching this and that's what you're walking through and you're thinking about, then absolutely the Cyara team is going to be one that you want to connect with at this year's conference. Now, Amitha, while I have you, I have two more questions I want to explore. And the first is this. Every year, Enterprise Connect is certainly a place where new buzzwords bubble up, or there's some topics that become incredibly front of mind for leaders. As you think about the next, call it 12 to 24 months, what do you think is the thing that enterprise communication or CX leaders need to get right over this next period of time? Where does their focus need to be?
Absolutely. And Justin, as you know, AI is as much on everybody's mind, most super important topic, and everybody would be looking at where AI would take them, where AI would influence the customer experience. And as I mentioned, we talk about agentic AI, but it's a very loaded term, I would say. I think most customers are coming from the standpoint of, hey, I have this rule-based system, so how do I automate it? Or I have customers coming in, and how do I intelligently handle them and make their experience better, or handle them faster and better, right? So these are the places that where they are coming from, but they really are looking at how do I make sure AI is helping me eradicate all this bad customer experience. And I would say as they are looking at the AI models, the AI systems, I would probably just limit it to two things, right? One is trust. Trust becomes a hard requirement. And this is where many people or leaders treat trust as, a checklist or a policy that they have to consider at some point of time. Regulators, boards, and your own customers will increasingly expect the proof, right? And not just that you're eliminating hallucinations, misuse, and so on. So take a hard look at the AI trust, what it means to your requirements, what it means to your customer journeys. I think that is one thing before even you start. You start to think about those requirements. Two, I would say, is, as I mentioned, operating model for agentic AI, right? Because there's a lot of noise and a lot of players in the market. But when you are thinking about deploying something with AI, something with bots, and something agentic, look for what is the clear ownership, what is that escalation path, and run books that you can use when your agents are failing or whether they are doing well. So I think understanding that is super important. And finally, I would say is, with all this, you should have a very clear view of what you're measuring in terms of outcomes, right? And tie your outcomes to things like containment with quality, improved conversion for sure, right? And fewer incident-driven escalations. A lot of these things also matter. It's not just the automation rate, because I've seen a lot of customers put a lot of emphasis on the automation rate, but that's not the ultimate outcome, right? The ultimate outcome is really how best you are providing the customer service to your end users as well. So I would say these are certainly the things that they should look out for. It'll just accelerate. Things will move. Things will change. Things will move at a very faster pace. And, at Cyara, we are learning this as well. We definitely are engaged with a huge open source community of AI users. We are, I think, lucky in that way, where we get a lot of information firsthand from multiple users using these AI agents, and they ask for, okay, do you have this feature, that feature? So with that input, we go to enterprises. So it's at least there's a lot of validation tried and tested. But still, we are learning. We are learning what enterprises need, and we are taking our learnings into our products and moving fast with a great momentum.
Amitha, there is no doubt that this space is moving fast right now, and I think everybody's hanging on for dear life just to keep up some days. I want to go back to one thing that you said about outcomes, and it's a reminder to everybody watching this that trust itself is an outcome, and it's an outcome of what we intentionally design and allow or not to be operationalized in the way that we are providing service and experiences. So I think it's really, really important to recognize that you said it, it's not just this policy. It really is the byproduct of what we put into work and enable through our systems, processes, and technologies. So that's, I think, important for all of us to be thinking about. Here's my last question for you. If I have never been to Enterprise Connect before, what is a piece of advice that you have for me as I prepare before the conference, as I get on site, and even after the event to make sure that it delivers incredible value?
Absolutely. And Justin, as we were talking earlier, right? So I've been to Enterprise Connect for, I've been coming for last couple of years for sure. And I think the best use of those days where you are there at the conference is really look for clarity, right? Instead of looking for features, because there's so many sessions, so many demos. I think they're all great, and sometimes it's also a little bit overwhelming. But then, what I've seen is all these high value attendees show up looking for clarity. So what I would, as a preparation, what I started even doing, a few years ago was, write down one problem that I want to solve this year, right? Whether it's scaling AI agents or reducing call failures or automation or meeting compliance, right? And decide where you are in that AI maturity. Are you just starting off? Do you have a POC, or are you looking for some validation across different vendors? And also, I would say, once you have that written down, identify one risk you're worried about. But you haven't operationalized yet, right? Whether it's trust, reliability, compliance. And then once you have done this homework, during the conference, pressure test that, right? If you are in sessions or booths, ask, how does this work in production? Because there are a lot of demos that you see in the booths, in the sessions. I think a good question to ask is, how does this work in production? And what breaks at scale, right? And as I said, ownership, who owns failures when this goes wrong? And how do you prove that this is compliant or trustworthy? I think these certainly are great answers to have. And if you're also looking for validation, I think these would certainly clear your questions on validation. And definitely after the conference, convert some of the insights that you have from the conference into action. Most often or not, you go to these very big trade shows and then you have that high, and it soon gets lost after the event. So what I've done in the past is, within a week or two, right? Pick one idea that I believed will materially improve the customer experience or even reduce the risk, right? And turn it into some small time-boxed pilots or something which will clear the success criteria and move forward with it. So I think that's basically the best use of your time there at Enterprise Connect. And of course, I would say at the end of the day, right? It's also meeting people. For sure. I wouldn't trade anything for that. I think it's a great place to meet people. It's a great place to exchange ideas. All these sessions, keynotes, all are great. But at the end of the day, I think these small talks that you would have in the lobby or while having lunch or dinner, I think these add up, and these also would give you great insights.
Amitha, I am with you. It is awesome to have the opportunity to connect and learn with people in the hallways, in the sessions. Enterprise Connect is going to be an amazing week. I'm excited to be there with you, with the Cyara team, and everybody who's joining us here in Las Vegas.
I'm excited. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. We will see you there.
See you there.